Hi, everyone. So excited to be here today. Let me see. Have an issue with LinkedIn. Let me just fix it. With that, Carl, why don't you introduce yourself? Keep the show rolling, and maybe just catch everybody up and latest thoughts on capital.
Sure. So, hello to everyone. I've been a guest on Don's show a couple times in the past and quite happy to be here again and looking forward to working with Don closer over time as I'm learning how to build my own show. So, I welcome everybody's feedback on anything I say or do today. But my background is that I've been working with startup businesses for over 4 decades. I've worked with hundreds of businesses and getting up and off the ground, and particularly find myself, I will say, always curious about what's new under the sun, what new product or service can be brought to market by small businesses and entrepreneurs that can make the world a better place. And along the path to bringing those products to market is typically a need for more capital than the entrepreneur has in their pocket at the time. And so I've worked with these entrepreneurs and I've started my own businesses and have a number of businesses on the side where we go out and raise capital. And by raising capital, I take a different approach. I have a little bit of a different thought on how it should be done. And I'm typically running contrary to most of the stuff you're going to see in TV or in pitch competitions. So I can be controversial at times, and sometimes I'm okay with that. I'm not intending to be controversial. I'm just trying to do it right and help the entrepreneur be successful in that capital campaign with the least amount of time and energy so they can get back to business.
Okay, well, I think we're that's a good start. We're live everywhere again. Just a minor challenge, which I completed 26 minutes faster than yesterday. So it took me 27 yesterday. I got it down to 1 today. So it just shows you progress is in the wings. And so blessed to have Carl with us because, when you look at everything, it takes an investment. Most people define capital as money, but there's even more value in time, in effort, in thought. So if you really had a diversified portfolio, you'd want to be investing in yourself. You'd want to be investing in your time and invest your time in what you want to do. And if everybody balanced their time, their energy, and their thought like they watched their bank balance, which doesn't change very much either. And in most cases, you know what it's going to look like based on what you just did the day before. So it's not like you open up a box and it's a surprise. And I think that's where a lot of people get unbalanced and it could even be in areas of their life. Some people invest too much into work, some people too much into play. And I think that's where community, that's where honest, fair insights and constructive criticism fits in, because you always want to keep everything balanced. You don't want to overdraw, and you don't want to have excess somewhere where you don't need it. So I think that's really key, is self-reflection, reevaluation, and reallocation, right? If something's starting to generate more benefit, you start moving more time, energy, and thought to it. And actually, in a lot of ways, what I learned in business is having a focus on just a few things and not a lot of things. It's too hard to spread yourself thin. Carl, please. And by
Sure.
the way, comments are open, so feel free to comment.
Yeah. So, as I was describing, I work with lots of entrepreneurs. Sometimes first-time people, sometimes they're serial entrepreneurs on their second, third, fourth, or 10th venture. And along the way, when you talk about capital, you also have to talk, as you described it, Don, in the context of investment, because where you put your capital to work is an investment, whether you spend it on yourself or in your business or your family. And too often you'll see entrepreneurs who do get out of balance, as they call it. But I favor the work of Clayton Christensen and his book on how you measure your life, where he says it's not possible truly to balance your personal life and your business life, that you have to treat them as two competing forces. And you have to have two business plans, and you need to allocate resources to both, to your personal life and to your business. Otherwise, what happens all too often, the business dominates everything, and it starts disrupting, if not destroying, the personal life. So balance is critical, but you need to think of it from a strategic outcome of, what do you want to do personally? What do you want to do as a business? And let them fairly compete with each other to improve and synergize each other.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I think it's, it's really awareness of what you can do, where more people are thinking what outside influences are going to do, right? Waiting for that door to open, waiting for someone to call, someone to return something. And that's going to happen anyways. The time one worries about what's going to happen if they don't do something should be spent time doing something so it avoids happening, or at least you keep yourself occupied, right? The future will come here soon enough, and it'll bring whatever it's going to bring. Projecting, anticipating, prognosticating. It's not any more fun when you're right when things are wrong. So I would rather be wrong about things that don't benefit me. And sometimes what you aim for is what you get, good and bad. With that said, we got our first comment from Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. Every time I see a comment come out, I know something's working okay. Agree. Progress is a great investment to spend your time on, not just your money, and much better than spending it on Congress. Okay. And, what I see about, a comment like Dennis is really, focus, and if nothing else, everybody knows we're in very dynamic times that are changing at the speed of light, and how do you respond when most situations, institutions were based on a different time frame, even 20, 30 years ago. And they don't change as quick. But what that does say, the nimble, the responsive, have a very strong head start going forward. And I think that's what the power of live streaming, the power of having communities like this can be, is most people have never had that much access. And they don't know even it exists sometimes. And if it does, how to take advantage of it. And most people just need to be heard, because they feel once they're heard, they're understood and appreciated, and now maybe a relationship can happen. But how do you elevate and distinguish and differentiate yourself? And I think those are going to be key skill sets going forward. And I can't wait. So, Carl, whatever got you into the investment business?
I graduated from law school a long time ago now, and I had a relative of mine who had started up a business in Denver, Colorado, and I was going to start searching for my first job out of law school, and my brother-in-law gave me a call, and he says, "Could you potentially help me out?" And he was engaged in software engineering. He was pushing the envelope beyond what most people could even comprehend. And along the way, he wasn't the best of business people. But man, did he know his technology. So while I was studying for the bar exam, I decided I'd help him out. We got the business turned around, got profitable, got it sold, and he was merged into a larger company. Where he did even better. His career really took off at that point. And I learned so much along the way about the challenges of a startup business and the difficulty of communicating the value, the benefit to people who don't understand what it is you're doing. So it's kind of like I started my career as a translator of what is this idea worth in terms of application once it becomes a product or service.
Okay. So over the years, what has changed the most?
I think the changes that have occurred is that every day is a new lesson. You would think that you could learn everything you need to know in a week or a year or a decade. But it took me almost 3 decades, 4 decades to get to the point where I started realizing that everything that you see on TV or you see in pitch competitions is actually a narrow or distorted perspective on the capital industry. It's not a broad spectrum view, it's not a 360, and it's certainly not an agile position. And that you needed to look at it differently. And it seems like, well, this should have been obvious, but in marketing 101, they tell you that your product or service should match up with what your customer wants. And if your customer is an investor, then your business needs to look like whatever that investor wants it to look like. But what we have seen is that a lot of people focus on the obvious money, banks and angel investors, which may be the least probable source of capital. And therefore, they're wasting all their time and energy talking to someone who is never going to give them anything until they were exhausted, they're out of time, or their business failed because they were so distracted from their business trying to raise capital. So I started focusing on people who had a reason to get behind the business. I call them stakeholders because they'll benefit from your organization whether they invest or not. These are people who sell you product. They're people who resell your product. Your customers. They're a social cause. The government collects taxes from you, and because they have this self-interest, they have a reason for you to succeed. Where an investor has no interest in you until they invest, and if you can't get them to that point, then you're not anywhere. So it seems that, again, we were talking earlier about a number of repetitions to get to excellence. Sometimes I will say inside epiphany is late to come. And if you have to keep banging at it, cracking at it, going, if this is not working, then you're not seeing everything you need to know. And I have another adage I say is that if you think you understand where you're at, you're not looking at it detailed enough.
Well, I think that makes, a lot of sense because, I've had almost 40 years of my business career and, growing, changing, adapting, reinventing all the time. And what I discovered is that a lot of people can't get out of their own way. They come in as their business instead of our business. And because ownership allows them that discretion, they usually personalize it to make themselves feel more comfortable or look better, or whatever the vanity element is, as opposed to the community element, the sustainable element, the duplicatable element. So, it's all about context, and it's all about awareness of what one can do. The good thing about pitching people that probably will never invest in you is if you understand that going in, it's a lot less stress, right? If it's just practice in a way, with the chance that, maybe it could light something up, or someone could say, it's not for me, but I know Jim down the road, he might be interested. That's how I always look at discovery, and have fun with it. Most people don't invest in people because they're not fun people, and they're not easygoing, happy to be with, because you got to look at like latching onto that person for whatever journey that's going to take, and is that the person you want to be hanging out with? So Carl, looks like you have something to say about that.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting. I think some days that I spend 80-90% of my time trying to peel back the myths of raising capital, all the stuff that everybody talks about. And there's books out there from Silicon Valley, and I make fun of them occasionally because I go, well, yeah, if I'm pitching only to millionaires and they all live in Silicon Valley and they don't know anything except Silicon Valley, their perspective of the world has little to do with me working with a startup business here in Denver, Colorado, and particularly where the investors are different. And I talk about, there's all kinds of flavors of investors, but there's a tendency, there's a myth that a one-size-fits-all pitch of selling stock in your company with participation in future profits is going to be all you need to do to get the money in the door that you're looking for. But my experience has been almost the reverse, that almost never works. Statistically, angels only invest about 2% of the deals they look at. And an entrepreneur can't afford to go to bat like a major league player and strike out 98 times out of 100 and expect that they're still going to be moving forward.
Well, I think to your point, it's kind of a learning until you start earning situation, and rejection does make you better. It'd be nice right out of the gate, first offer comes to you, but a lot of times after it, they'll tell you, well, if you would have got this right, or this was stronger, or here's our thresholds. But that's all just before they know you, right? And sometimes their numbers don't apply to you, their measurements. And it really comes down to, I think, having more than a financial interest, like you mentioned or alluded to earlier. I mean, if you've got someone like a landlord that has a big lease and wants to see you pay that lease and stay there, they may be a potential investor, right? You might have a supplier that values you as a distributor and will do something. I know, UPS Capital was an arm that UPS had, and they only invested in businesses that were connected with UPS. Most of the time it was technology, which was something they could integrate and they'd have some proprietary interest in. But also, if they could make importing, exporting easier with letters of credit, if they can do all kinds of things, they become more of your business. And therefore, there's more loyalty and commitment going forward. Carl?
Yeah, so this again is, there's a tendency to oversimplify and think of everything in money and everything in terms of cash today. But once you enter the time value of money, you start thinking of the fact that people are investing in you, not for where you're at today, but where you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Then you understand that they're placing a bet. They're going at risk and putting money with you. But the point you made about working with your landlord is that if your landlord gives you an extra 30 days to pay your bill, they have given you credit and you have raised capital. And so many times people don't understand that just changing terms of payment, either on how soon you have to deliver a product or how quickly you have to pay off a vendor, is giving you more elbow room in your cash flow to do more things and be more flexible in how you go about doing things. And then another example, as you mentioned, is landlord would like for you to be there. But I had a guy come to me who had a sign company. He was looking to raise $450,000 to buy a new building. And I said, well, what do you need the building for? And he says, well, I'm outgrowing my space. And I said, well, I'm willing to bet that the city you're in has an empty building that they would lease to you for free or delay payments because they want more jobs in the community, and your expansion is going to give you 3, 4 more jobs. He goes, yeah. And so I said, you need to go check with them and see if they have a building. And it's one of those rare days where I happen to know that the city manager was out in the hallway at this particular conference. So I went out and asked him, I said, you guys got any empty buildings this guy can look at? He goes, yeah, we have 3. Where's he at? I'll talk to him right now. We'd be happy to make a deal. So the city exchanged future jobs or taxes on future jobs in exchange for rent on a building. No cash changed hands in that transaction, but it was an investment by the city that met the needs of that particular business because they got out of the mindset that everything has to be in cash. And it's a particular challenge. I just extend that a little bit, but if you have to go to an angel investor who you don't know and convince them to give you money to go pay the bills for that landlord, then you're doing two actions. When if you had gone to the landlord and worked out a deal straight up with the landlord, it's only one transaction. And the time and energy for one transaction is half of two transactions. And your time being your most scarce resource, you have to use it as effectively, efficiently as possible.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, in my career, I did the same thing. Every city has enterprise zones or funds, that they can exchange for some future benefit that they wouldn't have gotten unless they invested in it. So, and the same thing with landlords, depending on the term of the lease, the cost of the lease, sometimes you can either front load things or back load things, that says, hey, my first year, because I'm just getting going, let's reduce the rent to this. And once we get something, because you have to figure who already has a vested interest in you.
Right.
Where have you achieved extra value over, like Carl says, a stranger, a person who's just a financial person looking at returns, looking at security, versus someone who's a believer, somebody who knows you, has been in your store or your office or your warehouse and likes what you're doing. And a lot of people don't have the same investment return interest as other people. Some people are just angels by being angels. They know it's not a great deal, but it's a good cause. It's a good group of people. It's an interesting concept. And some people will take a flyer. And the alternative is, why not? And see, that's the thing, is there's always codependency in business. And at a certain point, well, here's Debbie, our butterfly lady. Debbie was on just the other day. She's finally in Vero Beach after spending 6 months in Wisconsin. And now she's actively involved in the monarch butterfly migration to Mexico. Crowdfunding has worked well for me since COVID. I ran 2 Kickstarter projects to generate the funding, initially for the expense of my recording process, and then to have Mighty Wings printed. And it's a new world. It's a new day. And a lot of times you only have to think incrementally. That give me enough money for the next 3 years is forget about it. And you don't want to pay 3 years for something that may not be necessary, because, the interesting thing about capital is that it's very expensive if you don't do it right. And it's very expensive if you don't do it with the right people. So you could have a great deal with awful people, and that's not going to turn out too well in most cases. So I think the key is what do you have to have is more importantly, because that's when you're going to make a sacrifice, whether it's equity or debt, or most cases you'll be signing personally if you're going to a bank or something like that. So I think that's important. And the thing is you want to set a good momentum and tone to the investment, right? So you don't want to build expectations that's not going to be realized, and the low-hanging fruit is the best fruit you can serve in the beginning, because they become believers. They build confidence, they build trust. And then if you got a hiccup, it's like it's a hiccup versus, hey, it started out like that and only gets worse with this group. And that's another thing, is people only have so much patience, especially for disrespect. So, you can't just think once the check cashes, it's my money. They come for the ride. And also, why not appreciate where is the gratitude? Where is the access? Where's the involvement? Where's the openness? Right? And I think those are characters. Carl?
Yeah, so I advise my clients that they need to do their own due diligence, not be the sufferer of due diligence, but to conduct their own due diligence of investor candidates. And the two things I look for beyond the money is what is their affinity with this particular opportunity? Do they love it? Do they want to see it happen? Do they want to become an evangelist for it? And then the second question I ask is what can they do beyond their money? I don't want anyone sitting on the sidelines passively watching me do all the work. It's not that I can't use the money, don't appreciate the money, but if I have a choice, and I believe typically you will, a choice between one investor and a second investor, you want to pick the investor who's going to stand up for you, who's going to get out there and champion your company, who's going to try to introduce you to new customers, other investors, open doors, share resources, anything that you can use as, again, as an asset, which is a form of capital to help you move forward, because they become a force for good, for your good, and you want them on your side. So you're not building an audience who's sitting out there while you put on a stage play and applauding every now and then when you finish a scene or an act. You want them on stage, you want them engaged, you want them working with you, so your team is growing day after day. And Don, to one of your earlier comments about the value community that you establish with a program like this, I can't say enough in support of that type of strategy. So if you think about it, that if you're an entrepreneur and you're standing in the middle of a valley, your perception of the distance is blocked by everything around you. But if you climb to the top of a hill symbolically and you look around, you can now have a better view of what's going on in the world, what you can do. But it's even better if you have a community, which is like building your own intelligence network. Every country in the world has people out there sharing intelligence back to the central so that you can make better decisions. And when you build your community, they serve that same purpose. They're, even though they may disagree with you, they may tell you you're going off in the wrong direction. That's valuable intelligence to you that's saying maybe you don't have it right. Maybe you need to make a change. Maybe you need to modify your product or service. Don't make assumptions that you're the only source of information in the world and you're always right. That has proven not to work for me so well.
Well, I think, you make so many good points in that money and legal documents are pretty cold and hard. And once you can dial into the people side of it, the relatable side, like you say, is someone passionate about their business? Is someone waking up on Mondays, can't wait to get started versus praying for Fridays? And the same thing goes with investors. Are they, it's character, it's honesty from a standpoint of getting in front of things. I always found that to be important. If you know something that's going to drop, get in front of it and tell everybody before it happens, because they're going to know about it anyways. And if they know you knew and they didn't know, the question, what else aren't they seeing or hearing? Because people are used to taking losses, but they want to take losses that had a chance, And the other thing, and to come back to what you're saying about the community, is what I'm seeing about these shows is everybody knows who their community they'd like it to be, right? If I said, Carol, just tell me 3 characteristics of the ideal person you want to be talking to. And I talked to somebody actually in Bangkok who is doing just fabulous. And he's actually he's in charge, he's the head of Financial Planners Association for all of Thailand for like 4 years. And he's on all these shows. And we were talking and he says, in most cases, I was just shooting too low. My deal was right, but it wasn't for the people who I was presenting it to. He had a program that cost $120,000 a year. And if you don't have $120,000, doesn't matter how much you like it, you're not going to do it. And if you're not a player at certain levels, you're not going to do it. So I think you got to match yourself. But the incredible thing now is you could foster, cultivate, and have that community you talk to on a regular basis. And that's the whole thing. What I learned about this show is anybody can get their theme show, but they have to know how to sustain it. Right? And to sustain it, you need a community, not an audience. An audience will go to the next show. A community will come back with you, especially if you have so much knowledge and wisdom that someone can say, you know, listening to that person saved me from doing a deal there, or allowed me to put this into my deal or my thinking. You know, and everybody needs an investment counselor. It depends. Some people need relationship investment. Some people need knowledge. Some people need whatever they need. And by saying is, I'm not going to wait for people to come to me. And I can't go after and chase people, but I can create something that can build and build. And eventually that gives you amplified reach. Because you're not always marketing to the people who are supporting you. Again, that's another position. So I think just like you know, an investment proposal, someone needs to have an investment proposal for themselves, right? What do I want to invest in? In most cases, what do I want to redirect? You know, I always wondered about people that we're giving away everything in the company for a lot of money and then use it for a big paycheck and a lot of unnecessary expenses. You know, if that money costs so much, where's the sacrifice? And that's another thing, you know, even without getting too far off, in turnarounds and restructurings, you know, whenever you had a creditor committee or any group that was going to make a sacrifice or a concession, the question is, what are you doing? Right? So, Carl, what can you say about negotiation and the intricacies of it?
Well, it always helps before, as I say, before you engage in any activity to gather intelligence, do some analysis. And as we talk to investor candidates, the first thing we should be thinking about is not putting money in our pocket, but how can we help that investor candidate achieve their goals? If we start the conversation with an investor candidate by saying, I think I can help you, I have their immediate attention because I'm talking about them and their self-interest, and that's really where they want the conversation to go. Whereas if I walk in with my hat in hand and go, I'm a startup business, I deserve funding, and you should give it to me because you have funding, I can't think of a quicker way to get kicked out the door. I really, you want to study who you're talking to. You truly want to respect who they are and the resources they can bring to bear. And by framing every conversation about them, and then once you figure out how you can help them, then you have to figure out how they can help you. And that's the basis of an agreement. That's the basis of a relationship where there's a mutual benefit that comes out of that.
Well, and I think in addition to that, there's a saying, be known before you're needed, right? And it's time to really get out there and meet people, get to know people before you have to depend on them for advice or for funding. And it's really about, measuring twice and cutting once, because even in a business plan, there are priorities. There are things that are necessary, and other things can come a little bit later. So until you can do everything you can do, then it's easier to go to somebody else with an honest, story to say, and then here's why you should do it, and not because of the numbers. I can't tell you how many deals I did with people who told me they were the worst deals they ever did, but they're going to do it anyways, for multitudes of reasons. I had one gentleman that I went to see him, and I left there with $1 million letter of credit from him. And he actually told me that. He said, I talked to everybody here. I talked to my CFO. I talked to my VP of finance, the whole crew. And they said, this is the worst deal I ever saw. And he said, but I'm going to do it. And I said, well, why are you going to do it? And he said, to go and prove these guys wrong. He said, I never invest in numbers. I invest in people. Right. And you're a survivor. And with my help, we're going to make this happen. And he was an older guy who just felt that he knew a little bit more, knew a little bit better, was happy to get advice. But ultimately, and we had a partnership for 12 years. That was one of the best things that ever happened, only because someone decided to trust themselves and their feelings. And in the old days, you know, dating myself, that's used to, you go to a bank and the banker would want to get to know you. Right. And if they got to like you and know you, they might make a loan. What's your thoughts, Carl?
Yeah, there's kind of a three-step analysis I go through when I look at investor candidates. And the first and most important is, do they know you? Because if they don't know you, the chances of getting anything out of them basically just disappear. The second thing has to do with whether they have the resources you need, which may be cash, but may be that building lease that we talked about. It may be a piece of equipment. It may be that you need somebody on your staff, and maybe they could loan you one of their team members for 6 months to help you get up and running. And this is where a lot of people stare at me strangely, because I'm going like, everything is capital. And every transaction could be an investment. And I'm happy to go wherever it leads me if it gets me the resources I need to move forward. But the third part is motivation. And it's really interesting to get beyond that ego thing that all of us entrepreneurs feel that we can conquer the world all by ourselves, and move into the possibility, the strong possibility that maybe we can do better with help and with the help of others. And so I'm constantly talking to people of one or two, person leadership teams. You need to expand your team. You need to bring people on board your board, advisors, consultants, mentors, friends, allies. Build that army, because that army is, at the end of the day, your most valuable asset. It can conquer anything that's conquerable. And if the market goes completely south, it may give you a softer landing than you would if you just jumped off a cliff without a helmet head first, which is the way a lot of entrepreneurs approach things.
Well, being in business and financing, capital is always being deployed. Now it could be vendor credit, and that's another thing. Is it's all, at a certain point, it becomes a cash flow issue before it becomes a profit loss issue, right? I mean, you could be making a lot of money, but being way behind on your payables because your receivables aren't coming in or whatever. And everybody is a candidate. I mean, if you got some of your biggest customers, they're a candidate, right? Because maybe you fill a role that they can't fill and you have a premium, but you've never exacted that price. And the thing is it's about conferring, not pitching. They say if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money, right? And I think when you bring things to people's attention, like we're thinking about, when I expanded into Wisconsin, I had cities who were providing incentives for me to move there. And, it was either tax deferral or something. But you don't know what it is until you bring it out there. And some people are surprised when they find there's money. And even with vendors, there's all kinds of money that people don't move into. There's promotional money, there's rebate money, there's, all kinds of different money. And most people, I mean, without getting too much into detail, so there's companies that make nothing on the sale, but they make 10, 15% on the back end, right? Which is cash discounts, which is, all these other programs. And I think that's important to know people who can get you free money, that you don't have to give up equity. You don't have to give up control. And, I've seen the best and the worst of situations like that. Beverly says, exactly, it's about the value that you can bring to them. You need to do your research. What they do, they need is what can you provide to help them? And, how prepared are you? You know, when I did road shows, because if you want to raise money, sometimes you got to go where the money is. I'd have a person from the investment banking firm, and I'd also have some person who was the numbers person, right? They would just have their laptop and they would always say, okay, well, here's the percentage. And the idea was if you didn't know, you didn't say. You never guessed on a number, right? You say, I'll get back to you, or hey, Jim, can you find it and share it with us? And that shows like that's how you're going to do business, right? How you're selling yourself in a way, or your idea is the way they're going to see you selling that to the next person who comes down the road. Harvey's here. Harvey's just the greatest. Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late, but glad to be here. Great word today. And for sure, and Harvey's got the franchise show on Tuesdays. I was a visitor yesterday, like I always am on Tuesdays, following this show. And, Harvey's getting a community of franchising, right? And since no one else really stands out on LinkedIn, anyone who decides this is my area, I want to create a theme show around this, and then leverage a show like this to build audience and then take it with you, right? I mean, because that's the hardest thing about a show is no one shows up, or the people that show up are not anybody that's going to really care about what I have to say. So, Carl, before that, we got Dennis again. Glad you're here to hear for sure. I think we caught up. Leslie's here, Capital. Hi, everyone. And Carl, we've been going into the weeds a little bit today as far as maybe getting ahead of ourselves with terms or situations. But I think what we're trying to express is it's so creative today with crowdfunding, with just someone for a cause base, where in the past it was hard to go to a venture capital firm or investment banker and say, I got a cause I'd like you to invest in without having much of a return on your investment. And now you have that ability. So what's your experience in crowdfunding and kickstarting and all that stuff?
Yeah, I see right now. I'm unfortunately one of the people that believe that our economy is still pointed downwards, and we're looking for a good bump here next year. And as much as my opinion may or may not have a lot of clout, apparently Warren Buffett is doing his thing where he sells off stock, so he has money sitting idle as what they call dry powder to invest in businesses before they come out the other side. So I was both disappointed to see that he agreed with me, and also happy to see that I wasn't alone in my opinion. But I see crowdfunding as one of the things that was created by the legislature, the federal legislature, in 2012 to overcome the Great Recession, to create access to capital for entrepreneurs, to create jobs, get us out of that recession. And to date, it still hasn't been, in my mind, properly or fully implemented, even though they passed the $2 billion mark in total money raised since 2016 when the regs went into place. I still think most people are looking at it wrong. They're trying to be micro angel investors. They're using rules and protocols that work well at the angel level, but do not work at the $100 to $500 investment level. I'm currently involved in one capital campaign now, crowdfunding a Reg CF campaign for Splish Naturals. I'm working with a company in Colorado to do a series of farm-to-table food system crowdfunding campaigns, and we're getting ready to launch this week a protein food bar. And then hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we're going to do a mushroom-infused coffee that has medicinal properties in it. So I'm looking forward and continue to be a strong believer in the potential of crowdfunding. But when you get down to what I call the $100 level, you have to be thinking, who's my investor? Is their investment discretionary money or is it household income? Because if it's household income, their decision making is completely different than that of an angel investor who can stand on the sidelines and wait for the economy to settle out. So I encourage everybody to think of customers, not only consumers, but resellers, as a primary candidate for investment. And to a point you made earlier, Don, if I go to a particular reseller, a distributor, wholesaler, and I say, hey, I'd like you to invest in my company, and they're going, your profit margins aren't that good, you don't look like a good investment candidate, then I can still come back and go, but I could help you, couldn't I, if I lowered my price to you? I still need a profit, but maybe I could give you a greater discount. Well, to that reseller, that discount drops 100% to their bottom line. Every dollar counts for them and a new discount you give to them. So they should always be open to talking to you about doing that. And so if they place an order with you and you make a profit, even though it's a smaller profit, you're so much further down the road than out chasing someone about a maybe dollar investment that may you have to come back and still do what you just did.
Well, that's so true. And I think the key element today is creativity. And like I say, your best customers are your best referrals. And there's I see, like, I know people in my family that I wouldn't say invest in companies, but buy their products as, so in other words, if you give them this, you'll end up with this every month or so, or as soon as that product gets produced, yours is free. So there's something that doesn't put the weight back on the business to say, I need money again, where they can satisfy a need, also create an opportunity, but also create a dialogue, right? Because eventually those founder investors, let's say, they can be a board of advisors for you, right? They could be testers for you. They could be first adopters, new products, you get it first, and some people just want to be into it. That's why some people will spray a couple $100 in a lot of places, because it's fun, right? And if they get lucky and they get their money back, that's cool. But it's really the time and thought and satisfaction. And there are people who like to do good for other people, and it doesn't affect them too much. I've had so many people tell me, because I would always ask, why did you do this? And a lot of times, because I can. I'm in a position where, what means something to you means nothing anymore to me. But helping and being part of something does mean more now. So not everybody is looking at it from the same way you're looking at it. They're not looking at you. And, I think that's the intangible. And the question is, what else can I do to help you? And what else isn't here that I could build to it? So if you're striving to ratchet up together, because people look at it like, wow, this could be fun. This person could make me a better person for being into this and around that person. With that said, moving back to Beverly, exactly, it's about the value you can bring them. You need to do your research. What do they need? What can you provide? Harvey says, okay, not a problem. Always good to see you, Harvey. But he says, capital is such an important issue in the world of franchising. It's a subject I discuss with every franchisee, and the more inventive the solution, the better. And it's seeing value and showing value to people who didn't recognize it. And it never hurts as an investor to give a little bit of praise. And an honest investor will say, well, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, or I think that's quite an accomplishment, or you're not even really exposing this quality of this business. And I think that's why you think of investors beyond money, right? Is what influence do they have in the industry? What phone calls can they make and connect you with somebody? What's their expertise? Maybe they're into facilities. Maybe they have arrangements that are a special deal and it justifies. The other thing is, the more you're talking to, the better you are. What you never want to do is one, and that's it. and you're dependent, and that's it. It's not a good feeling. Debbie says creativity, listening along, truth, transparency, community building, do good for others, golden rule, equals always works. The other thing you have to demonstrate is you're a people person, that you can build teams within your organization. You could be the ambassador and the face of the company and go out there and represent the brand properly. I mean, sophistication goes a long way if it's based on reality and experience. And I think that's why people have had experience, are more seasoned. They're not kind of like shoot the moon every day. And I think having a blend also helps, right? If you look at a championship hockey team, you always got the 19, 20-year-old superstars, but you got the 36, 38-year-old veterans who keep everything kind of like straight, and you get a blend and a balance. And the other thing is who is there when you're not there? Because the whole question is what happens if you get hit by a bus, right? To an investor. If you're it and something happens to you, there's nothing, right? If you got some redundancy, if you got some complementary people. Another thing is you need to have some time, right? If it's all about you, when do you relax? And especially in a growing business. Harvey, investment and capital are far beyond money. If you give and find value, repeat and scale this, the money will tend to follow. Patience is important. So true. Because I tell you one thing, there's more money than great ideas for the money. There's always money if it's worth it. And I think Carl would agree, people would rather have a better deal and pay more than a more slippery deal and get a bargain. What's your thoughts, Carl?
I totally agree with you. The having engaged in enough high risk ventures, then there's one of the myths out there. High risk means high reward, and every time I hear a student in class or talking with somebody say that, I go, high risk just means high risk. There isn't necessarily a commensurate reward with that. What they're looking for is the probability of success. That's the most important thing, that the degree of success will follow, so to speak. You have to be successful first in order to have a high return. So you want to look at all the fundamentals. And it's interesting, Harvey's comment, because I look at franchising as another way of raising capital by using communities. A lot of businesses go, well, I want to expand and have 10 stores. And I go, great, do you have the money for 10 stores? And they go, no. And I said, then you're going to have to go talk to some angels, or you could consider franchising and building a network of people who agree with what you're doing. And each franchisee is bringing their own capital to the table. So you're not raising the capital, they are. So you've in effect, you've outsourced the capital raising to your franchisees, but you've built a network of other people who are all working in common and sharing in the common resources of the franchise to make your vision real. So it is a very interesting form of both raising capital and building your network of followers, supporters. And so I'm always interested, as I say, and we've talked about today, it seems like anybody could be funded if they can get down to the fundamental reason of who they are and what value they bring to other people, whether it's their customers, their vendors, it's the community they work in. But to be most successful is you want to have a large community, and by doing franchising or bringing people under your team, every member of your team has their network of people. So you're borrowing their networks, you're integrating them into your network so that your network is larger, stronger, bigger. And at some point, a large enough team will get anything done that's possible to be done.
Well, I think to that point, again, being creative, sweat equity has a lot of value, right? So, somewhere in the middle, you might have a store manager who wants to participate in the profitability of the store, doesn't have any money, and says, okay, I'll contribute a third of my pay every year. And in 3 years, whatever it is, I vest. and now I get to participate in it, because at that point, that person is generating an opportunity. Plus, they have a vested interest, which means they'll probably be a better store manager, and they'll probably hang around long enough to get their investment. And the other thing is you get to save money in the beginning, right? So if you can save a third of a store manager's pay over 7 stores, I mean, that's a lot of competitive advantage and motivation, and probably benefit of shrinkage and savings of awareness. So, I think, again, taking inventory of what you have, who you have, what you've done, I mean, those are all assets. All the connections, and I'll tell you another thing, the people you think won't help you do, and the people you think will help you won't. And it always turns out to be the case as someone shows up that you just didn't even think of, and maybe who's been watching you from afar, or something good happened to them because of you. And other times it's like, wow, they're not calling anymore. They're not coming to see me anymore, these sales reps or whoever they are. And it's a tough lesson. And hopefully you can learn through other people's experiences like Carl. I think a little bit of investment up front can save you a lot of pain. And ignorance is never an excuse. You hate to have to say, I just did this and I had no idea, and you present with 80 pages of legalese, and no one's going to read that stuff. And that's another key. In my background, all the documents were necessary for documentation, but it was always between the people. And the people could make accommodations, they could add more, they could take more, whatever it was. And those were the understandings I want, is that, hey, we're doing the best we can with the knowledge we have, right? As things change, we have to change in order to stay together. And what you don't want is dissonance. The last thing you want to do is be fighting for your business outside the boardroom, and then fighting for your business inside the boardroom. And then another thing I've known, when people invest money, they think they got an inherent right to be smart about what they're talking about, right? And I had people who would fly in from Boston. I had on my board of directors in the 80s, I had a gentleman who was professor at Boston University, was the CFO of B. Dalton Bookstores, which was a huge chain at the time. And he would read something on the plane and bring it up, and everybody, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, do it. I'm doing it. You guys are getting back on a plane. So let's be a little careful when we just read something and say, let's do something. There's a lot to it. It's a balancing act, and you got to be, if you're not happy at the get-go, it only gets worse. Let's say that. If you're going to be chasing your tail, it's not a good opportunity. Dennis says, agree, nothing is right. If you're too liberal to the left, middle of the road is the safest, and you got to give and you got to take, and that's another thing. So there's a point where, even though you're not agreeing, just to keep harmony, or to show you're going to value someone's input, hey, we'll look into that for you. Or, hey, we'll try something on a trial basis. And that way everybody felt heard. And maybe, there was a guy that said to me, have you ever made a mistake in your life? And I said, yeah. He said, do you ever think it could happen again? And I said, probably. So, well, this could be the case. Harvey comes back. Great point, Carl. I love that thought about franchising as a way of raising funds. Very interesting conversation. Well, that's what community is, and that's what I love about bringing people in who have capital experience like Carl, franchising experience like Harvey, business experience like Dennis, and everybody has something of value that they can point out that maybe another person right next to them has that same value they haven't taken into consideration. And a lot of it is packaging and presentation, like Carl says. If you get there on time, if you shake everybody's hands, if you're happy, if you're excited, if you can't wait, the music is what people appreciate beyond your words. And that's why you need a firm. That's why you need somebody who can kind of like okay, we got to modify this, we got to put this together, blah, blah, blah. So it looks like it's almost top of hour. It always goes so quick. I was fascinated with the conversation because it's kind of dear to my heart. And I get excited by it because it really does test the individual to rise to the occasion of bringing people in. And it's funny how money is such an emotional topic for people, right? You can go to somebody's house and they'll give you anything in a refrigerator, but ask for $10 till tomorrow. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, now we're in a different land. And it's still the same $10 cake you would have ate, but you transverse those areas. So Carl, it looks like you're laughing, happy, excited. What do you think about Capital Now and the show today?
No, it's a great show. We had some great points that I think are made, that capital is any asset that helps you move forward your business, to start it or grow it. But to gain access to that capital, you've got to treat everything and everyone as an asset and respect who they are and what they bring to the table. And then at that point, it's a negotiation. What do you have that I need? What do I have that you need? Can we strike a deal and keep it going? I just think that building the relationships, building the community as you do through this show is so precisely so very important to everyone, to think in terms of community first. What's my role in the community? What am I contributing to my community? And with that, everybody in the community will appreciate your help. Some will do some stuff, some won't, but it'll get you down the road. So thanks again, Don, for the opportunity to be on your show today.
Well, thanks for being part of the duet and harmonizing so well. And one last thing I'll leave with everybody is a no really is a not yet. And remember that. And so you don't want to burn bridges. You want to be gracious on the way in and the way out. You want to be respectful of time. And you want to appreciate whatever they gave you because they gave you an hour of them. And as long as you find out what didn't work, that's a benefit. I was like, I understand you're not going to do the deal, and I'm not here to change your mind, but I'd love to know what was it that I could have done better, or what was the challenge? And some people will say, we don't invest in that. That's not a industry we're very familiar with. So you have to be cognizant of, are you a match, and do a little research, right? If someone has a threshold of $1 million and you're looking for 200,000, you want them to make a change for you, and you can just find somebody that's already in that market. So yeah, I almost feel like I should be in the capital market again, but I'm happy to be in the community market because again, it's not as monetized. And it also lends itself to creative thought and communication. So Carl's going to be coming back on a regular basis. Can't wait to spend more time. And I think Carl's going to occupy the capital seat for quite a while. So if there's anybody out there who has questions about capital or is in the market, then I would say Carl's a good person to connect with and have conversations, because communities need to be interactive. And if you know somebody that's looking to raise capital, and I think everybody helping each other helps the community itself. So with that said, come back tomorrow if possible. I'll tell you, tomorrow is Kelly, Harvey, and me. So you'll see Harvey in person. Missed Harvey, looking forward to having him back. On Friday, we'll have Jeffrey with Kelly again. Saturday, we've got Catherine with Carol Kim, who's coming back for the second time. Wonderful lady. Sunday is Sarah. Monday is Gretchen. And Tuesday is Beverly. And then Dave Snell is next week. So it just gets better. So with that said, thank you so much. We sure appreciate your participation and look forward to helping you into the future. Take care. Make more capital. Bye for now.